Mou Podcast. Dude, I am literally so excited and pumped to have a guest today. She is so amazing and we truly energetically match. I can't even believe it. Like, this is our second time talking, and I feel like I've known her like my whole life. So, here is Jenn Johnson. She is an RN and is dedicated nurse with over 16 years of experience in emergency rooms across northern and southern Ontario, Canada. A frontline worker through the most challenging times, Jenn has witnessed firsthand the intense pressures of the profession, from life and death moments to the struggles of coping during the pandemic. A passionate advocate for nurse well-being, Jenn's new book, Nursing Intuition, which we will talk about today, was written to support her peers by offering insights on how to reconnect with the love of nursing and foster resilience in a rapidly changing healthcare environment. She's also a wife and a mother of two. So, hi, Jen. I'm
Hi,
so excited
how's
to
it
have you here.
going? I'm excited.
Oh, good. So let's get right into it. What led you
Yeah.
into the nursing profession, and how did your journey evolve over the years to eventually include writing a book?
Yeah, so I never wanted to be a nurse. Never once, never ever. Had one family friend who, had a mom who's a nurse, but she was like health, she's public health. So Monday to Friday, 8 to 4. So never really any exposure to shift work or anything like that. And when I went into university, started with a biology degree, and it wasn't until I failed my first half of organic chemistry, putting me like a year behind in my degree, where I went, this sucks. This isn't what I want to do. Like, this is not, it was Lakehead University. They've got a massive forestry program. So a lot of the biology was plant-based. I am no green thumb whatsoever. So I had a buddy in first year, and we kind of would go through her textbooks, and she was in nursing. I'm like, okay, this is cool. This is what I want to talk. Like, this is what I want to learn. This is what I want to do. So swapped into nursing, and it was one of those life moments where it's like, the universe slaps you in the face because you're not listening. And I thankfully was able to get on my feet, pivot, and get into nursing. And then, yeah, 16 years of ER. Um, yeah, God, it's flown by. It's just been absolutely insane. And then with the pandemic and burning out so hardcore, um, you know, was thinking that we wouldn't survive. We actually had attorneys who were coming forward when the pandemic first started to say like, "Hey, all the frontline workers, we're going to do your wills for free." I'm going, I know you mean well, but the take-home message that we're all taking is that we're not going to survive. So it really messed with us. And, couple months in, and things aren't really easing up at all. If anything, they're worsening. And I'm going, okay, if I die doing what I'm doing, how do you explain to a 4 and 5-year-old as they grow up that mom chose to continue to go to work and go to emerge and during all this craziness? And so started writing down some of my really good stories about some of the times that I've really helped, which very quickly led into all of the trauma that I had not even come close to touching over the last 16 years. But the common thread was just that there was always intuition in the background, whether I was paying attention to it, whether I wasn't, whether I'd said anything, did anybody do anything? It was just this little thread going through each and every story. And so did a deep dive because, of course, August 2020, you're not putting anything out there without a lot of science behind you, the misinformation, disinformation kind of era. So did a deep dive, and not only was there so much information on intuition, but there was so much information on specifically intuition in nursing, which is shocking. And so I'm like, okay, if there's science, it needs to not no longer be a 3 a.m. conversation. We need to go, we need to teach it, we need to talk about it, because the more I started to open up, the more my coworkers started to open up. And then the more I would talk about it, everybody else was starting to talk about it. So you're like, oh, this isn't this isn't a very hush hush kind of thing. It's something that we all do, and we all know that we each ever that everybody does, but we just don't talk about it, and we're not teaching it. It's not until you kind of hear from a senior nurse that, oh, this is what I'm doing. You're like, oh, they're actually doing that too. Okay. And you kind of take that lead. It's not a formal teach. So this is my interesting attempt at trying to bridge uh the thing that we're doing all the time. It's time to talk about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I really commend what you do, by the way. Being a nurse is so hard. Like I even thought about doing it one time in my life and I was like, nope, I don't like the hospital. I don't like that. Because my dad actually went through like cancer and he actually passed away from pancreatic cancer. But being at the hospital so many times is one of the most depressing places. Sorry to say that, but I commend nurses to do that every day or like have that as a profession. And thank you for being the frontline workers during COVID. Like, dude, that is wild. And so for you to even like be able to take care of yourself, write this journal, which ended up leading you to write this book, correct? And
Yeah.
following your intuition was one of the biggest things that helped you really understand how you can help others, right? And so
Yeah.
what specifically do you really teach in this book about intuition and why is that so important?
Yeah. So the first and foremost thing is everybody has intuition. Absolutely every single person. Any woman over the age of 12 knows that gut feeling of meeting a creep. The creep factor, the ick factor, you're just like, "Ugh, I don't want to go down that dark alley. I don't have a great feeling about this situation. I don't like that person. I don't know." We've all been there and we've been there repeatedly. So we as women tend to know that feeling and trust it without ever having any teaching done on it, right? So now when you take that into nursing, it's a little bit of a different thing where you're no longer worrying about your kind of survival. Now you're worried about your patient's survival. So looking at patients and going like, am I missing something? A patient looks sicker than how the story is kind of reading. There's no real red flags that the vitals are okay, but like there's I'm missing something. My gut is telling me that there's more to the story. And I really don't want to, be caught with my pants down kind of thing. And I don't want my patient to deteriorate or die. So I'm going to, maybe I'm keeping an extra tab on them. Maybe I'm doing vitals more often. Maybe I'm actually going to the physician and advocating to be like, hey, I really need you to see this person. I don't know what's going on. I just have this gut feeling that things are not going to go well. And I'm worried that they're going to deteriorate. Sometimes it's, a matter of just realizing that you're having those feelings. And instead of just immediately brushing them off, you actually pay attention and very mindfully pay attention to the thing and to the fact where, okay, this is happening. I recognize that this is happening. Now I have the choice to, am I going to do something about it or am I not? And, getting to the point of being comfortable where I can go to my doc, I can go to other coworkers to say, hey, I just don't know what's going on with Mrs. So and so. Can you come and have a look? Can you double check? I just, it's just finally leaning into that sensation of, I just don't know, and being comfortable with that sensation because it happens more often than not. It's not like we're only leading with intuition. Everything, of course, is science-based and Western medicine first, but there is a role for intuition in caring for people 24/7, 365.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it is so important to follow your intuition. So, how did you start tapping into more of that? Because, like you said, we instinctively know, like if you have a creepy person, you feel that. But then, for some reason, along the way, as you get older and older, I feel a lot of people tend to sway away from their intuition, and they are more into their logical mind or trying to just talk themselves out of it. Because I notice I do that.
Absolutely.
So I'm like, well, big mistake, right? And every time, right, every time you take a test too, like back in the day, we have like Scantrons or whatever,
Yep.
A, B, C, D, go with your first instinct. Like they tell you
Yes.
that, but then you always
Yes. Do
guess,
not
and
change.
you're like, no, I'm gonna change it, right? And then
It's
you're like,
fine. I'll just,
dang,
yep.
it's just that simple that we don't even follow our intuition, even when we're taking a test, which is so
I
wild.
know.
And so you're applying that to nursing, which is even more crazier and more powerful because you're saving people's lives and you know intuitively, like, oh, I need to do this or that. So how did you tap into it more? And like, how do you realize that we swayed away from that? And then like, actually knowing like, no, we actually need to follow our intuition and teach people this now to, to
Yeah.
other.
So I first noticed that I was doing it like instinctively. I'd already been a nurse for 5 years. We'd moved from Northern Ontario, which was a super slow little town. There was only one nurse for the ER, one nurse with two RPNs, or sorry, one registered nurse and two RPNs on the floor, maybe 14 beds. So like there wasn't a lot of opportunity to really trust your gut and go with it. It wasn't until we moved down south that all of a sudden I'm, in the ER in a stroke center. We're seeing 70 to 100 patients in 12 hours, and you're sitting at triage for 12 hours straight, and we jokingly call it story time because it's just one story after another story after another story, and you're just trying to sort people out to see, okay, are you sick, are you not sick, are you really sick? And so, the shift would go on, and I found myself just playing a game. Like I would start to, okay, to try and keep myself interested, maybe I just start to guess what people are coming in with. Is it they're holding their chest? Well, it's pretty self-explanatory, chest pain or stomach pain or this kind of thing. And it went from, just kind of guessing randomly what people were coming in with to then, getting the stories and you're hearing things and you're like, oh, I don't have a great feeling about this. And so we would have a lot of leeway to order blood work and x-rays at triage so we could kind of get things going by the time that the doctor saw this person. And so I would kind of like, I'm just going to run to my doc and just ask, hey, can I tack on this blood work, that blood work, things that we wouldn't typically do in the ER, but really could have a huge impact as to how the patient's going to be treated. And sure enough, anytime that I asked for additional blood work, that blood work was off. So it was like, okay, well, why am I doing this? It's like, well, there's this gut feeling and now I'm curious and now you're a puzzle and I really, really, really like puzzles. So maybe that was it. Maybe, your coloring was off, like you're more pale or you're more green. Or like there's just something about the story that really, you know, wasn't clicking because whether people realize it or not, I kind of operate on the basis that 90% of the people who come to see me in the ER that I'm triaging are lying to me. It's not that they are, very openly doing it. Sometimes they just don't know what medications they're taking. They don't know their past medical history. They're confused. They lost consciousness, so they're not sure what happened, from point A to point B. And so there are those missing pieces to the story. And so you're just like, okay, well, I just don't want again to get caught with my pants down. So I'm gonna just kind of go, I'm just gonna be a little bit extra careful. I'm just gonna be a little extra cautious and really kind of keep an eye on you as I watch your kind of process through the ER. And, it was always those people where I was just like, I just don't know. Like what's happening? Like I have a pretty decent idea what's going on, but there's something else. And watching them go through the ER, then finally get CAT scans or x-rays or blood work results finally coming back and you're going like, oh man, they're really sick. Like how did I see that coming? And like logical self, you're like, oh, I'm just really good at my job. I've done a lot of education. I've done, many certificates above and beyond just my nursing degree. But it's like, no, there's more to this than what I think. And so then again, in talking to coworkers, the more I opened up, the more I got back, and we're all doing it. We're just not talking about it. So it's just one of those things where it's okay, let's let's start sharing our stories. Let's start talking about it because nobody's got better stories than a nurse. We all know this. And so let's use those stories for teaching as well as just a little bit of entertainment.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea so much. And this is what you put in your book,
Yeah.
sharing your expertise, your stories, and what you've been through. So how do you teach new nurses coming in about following their intuition? Because it's kind of like a person to person thing, like your own intuition and how people really process that. I guess we all can feel a certain thing, but how do you honestly teach new nurses to go with their instincts? And mind you, when you're a new anything, you're gonna be
Yeah.
scared. You're gonna be scared to
Yeah.
like speak up and be like, no, I know that's wrong, but then no, they must know because they work longer than me or they're doctors or something, right? So
Yeah.
how do you really teach?
It's it's one of those things where it's best if there's a person in front of you. So there's a person in front of you where I already know that my gut's already pinging off. So now I'm taking that opportunity to then teach others. So if I'm triage and I'm already concerned about this patient, I'm bringing them into the room, I'm getting them hooked up to the monitor, I'm giving the story to the nurse who's going to be taking them over. But then I will tell them like, hey, I don't have a great feeling about this. Like, what do you like? Give them a once over, get the story, get them settled, get the blood work going, and like come back to me and tell me, what you think, kind of thing. And so a lot of the times, especially if somebody's teetering on the edge of critical, and we've got newer nurses who aren't that comfortable with critical care scenarios just yet, it's you're keeping a close eye on them anyways because you don't want them to flounder. We're not playing that game anymore. It's no longer the sink or swim. It's like let's help you learn without horribly damaging you mentally in the process because like the job's hard enough without the nurses also tacking on extra stress and chaos. So, let's keep an eye on this. And so sometimes it's just a matter of going back and forth and going through the shift to be like, hey, so what did you hear? Like, did you listen to their lungs? Did you listen to their abdomen? Like, what do you think's going on? What are your main concerns? Do you have any questions for me? Like, can I answer anything? And it's a collaboration. It's not just patient's no longer mine, it's yours, we'll see you later. It's it's a group effort. We're all in different places. Some days I'm gonna have a rough day, maybe I haven't slept, my kids have been nuts. It's one of those days. Maybe somebody else is having a really rough day. Like we take turns kind of carrying the load and working with each other so that when there is a critical care scenario that maybe I have more expertise, I can help you learn so that the next time this happens, you also have the education and can maybe help that other person behind you, and so on and so on and so on. So it's just a matter of, you know, taking the time to be very careful and cautious and, lots of checking back like, hey, what do you think? Do you need a hand with anything? Are you okay? How's that person doing? Lots of questions kind of back and forth. And sometimes I worry that I'm coming off across as like just like kind of vulture over top, just to be like, oh my God, what are you doing? Like, are you all right? Like, is this person okay? But at the same time, like they do have to learn, and it is technically their patient and their license. So it's a very fine line of being there for them and being supportive versus, you haven't brushed this off, right? Like we're still keeping a close eye on them. Like I know you got a lot going on in that room. Can I help with something else? And just kind of making sure that everybody's going to be okay.
Yeah. So you have a lot of pressure because you're like a lead nurse and you're teaching and it's a lot. And thank you for sharing that experience because I'm not a nurse, so I wouldn't even understand how you guys even go through that. But you having to manage somebody and then having to actually work on a patient as well, it's a lot. So thank you for sharing that.
No
Do
problem.
you have a story though, like when you did not follow your intuition and you're just like, darn it, I knew it. And then you're like, that's a learning lesson for me to like always follow my
Yep.
intuition after that.
Yeah, there's only been a couple of cases where it's just like, I'm tired, I'm running around, I'm not, maybe listening to my gut as much as I should be, or maybe it's just not as loud. Perfect example was like not even a week ago. So I had four admitted patients in the ER, plus I had one hallway patient who was still ER level, so they hadn't been admitted yet. They looked pretty well. They had a fall, kind of cracked her noggin a little bit, little old lady. But like hadn't been, you know, she was a little confused, might be confused at baseline, hard to tell. But like she looked pretty good. You're like, oh, that she looks pretty good. Like, so I end up being pulled to go on a transfer. So I'm doing this transfer for a newer nurse. So she was just a little uncomfortable with the medications and the other things. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll go. So I go to transfer out this other patient and I'm texting my charge to be like, hey, like, is that one in the hall gonna go home? They're like, oh, actually, they're definitely not going home. They have a skull fracture and three little bleeds in their head. I'm like, pardon me?
What?
Um, what? I'm like, they look so good though. He's like, I know they look good, but we're gonna move them into the cardiac room where that the patient that I had taken out was already, in that bed. So we're gonna move them into A and go from there. But yeah, definitely not going anywhere. I'm like, how did I miss that? Like sometimes you worry that you get a little bit too comfortable and a little flippant and that kind of thing. And sometimes it just really takes something happening where you're like, okay, I just need to be a little bit more cautious. And, you know, that was going to be the last person that I saw when in reality, it probably should have been the first one as they weren't admitted yet. They'd seen the doctor, but they hadn't been admitted. We were just waiting for the CT head to come back. But lesson learned, that should have been my first patient to see.
Oh, you never know.
Never
See,
know.
it's tough. And I feel like intuition plays a role with being confident within yourself too, because say like you hear your intuition, but then you're not confident, then you're just like, no, right? Like, yes, you made an honest mistake, like you
Yeah.
went with like how she looked versus, oh, okay, let's look and dive deeper, right? But there's a lot
Yeah.
of instances where it's not as serious and you're just like, okay, and you kind of brush it off or you're just not confident enough in yourself, so you second guess and you're playing in your mind.
Hmm.
There's a lot of that.
There's a ton. It's a skill that just it does take time to develop. It does take, a lot of confidence to be able to talk to other people about your concerns. You want to be coming into this role. You're like, I've graduated, I'm a nurse now. I should be being able to do things on my own and you want to be accountable, but at the same time, like there are just so many things that take a lot of time to learn and develop and, getting a flow going and being easier with assessing people and knowing which questions to ask to really kind of cut down on time. And so it's difficult, but it's one of those things where the science kind of says that even though, so you were worried that somebody was sick, so you went to actually go speak with your physician. Congratulations, you actually acted on your intuition. You spoke to somebody. If the patient come or the physician comes and assesses your patient and they're like, "Oh, well, they're actually not that sick. It's not too bad, whatever," and they kind of brush you off. That's okay because the science still says that even the doctor having that extra touch point on that patient still improves patient outcomes. So no matter what, even if you're wrong, you're still improving patient outcomes. You're still learning. You're still then building the confidence to be able to come forward and talk to people. So take easy on yourself. Like it does take a long time and you can still mess up. Like it's been 16 years. I still mess up. It's okay. We're human. We're not saints. We're not heroes. We're not, perfect. Perfect does not exist, especially in healthcare. So, just be kind because there are so many skills that nursing schools like, oh, you'll learn it on the job. And you're like, oh, great. Not realizing that the learning curve is straight up the second you actually get your license and start working at the bedside. So be kind to yourself. It takes a long time to get comfortable. I probably wasn't comfortable for about 5 years. Um, so just it takes time, and that's okay. It's just one day at a time, sometimes 1 minute at a time. It's just a continually you're always going to learn. If you've stopped learning, you need to get out.
Wow. If you stop learning, you need to get out. That's crazy because it's true. And nursing is always on the go. Like you will never do the same task or have the same story every day at work because it
No.
depends on the patient and the day you're having. So, how do you even like prep yourself for the day when you have work? Because a lot of nurses get burnt out. Like you guys do so much hard work. I literally commend you. I cannot even say this enough because I'm like, woo. And I'm the type of person who likes to be more comfortable in my day-to-day job, like knowing
Yeah.
the outcome, kind of like, that's
Yep.
boring me. But
And
nurse.
that's just it. Every area of nursing is a different specialty, right? So med surge, you do get a feel for how your day is going to go. You have X number of patients, right? You've got a specific ratio. You're tapped out at 4 to 6, depending on nights or days, usually. Your patients aren't, you can kind of guarantee that your patients aren't super sick because if they were, they would have already been upgraded to ICU or step down. Um, you might already know your patients. You might have already been working with them for months already. There are areas where you do get more comfortable with people because it tends to be kind of the same routine. You get in, you assess your patient, you're doing vitals, you're going to do your first med pass, and then you kind of hang out. And then you go around to check everybody's bottom, make sure everybody's clean. And then you hang out. And then maybe it's another med pass. Maybe then it's another set of vitals. And then you hang out. Like there is a feel to it. There is a cycle to it. Whereas the ER, yes, we do still, there is a lot of chaos at times, but the patients who are admitted that are just waiting for beds, it's still the same process. You go in, you assess, you do the vitals, you get their meds, you check bottoms, and on with the next, and then on with the next, and then on with the next. The difference is with the ER, sometimes you have to drop everything at a moment's notice to then get pulled into something where you have no idea what's happening. You know, somebody's coming in, they're unconscious. You don't know if they've taken any medications. Did they hit their head? Do they have any past medical history? Do we even know this person's name? Do we even know how old this person is? No idea. So the ER, you tend to have to be a little bit more comfortable with a lot of chaos, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of flexibility. The ICU, they're a little bit more rigid, right? They're more OCD than ADHD. The ER is very, very, very ADHD. ICU, you know, you have your 1 to 2 patients. You know that they're sick, but you've only got the 1 to 2. So then you focus. You know, you're doing vitals every hour, you're emptying the catheter every hour, you're charting every hour. There's a rhythm to that also. Um, but if you figure out your personality type, there are, you know, the various different specialties within nursing that suit various I want to say mental health conditions, but it's just like it's personality traits. You know, the ER is ADHD, the OR is type A OCD. Nobody makes an ER nurse cry faster than an OR nurse. Oh my God. But PACU, so recovery was also very, very fast paced. Like you were in, you were out as soon as you were up and talking, as long as I got your pain managed and you're vomiting okay, bye, on to the next and on to the next. And it was like a very like rapid fire, but you knew more about what was going on than the ER. So there's give and take everywhere.
Gotcha. But then how do you prepare yourself for a work day? Because like you said, ER is so hectic, you just don't know what's gonna happen or go on, and it's a lot. So mentally, as you know, a nurse, you're already burnt out all the time. You're a mom of two, and then having to have that fast-paced life. Do you actually take time before work, or do you like do anything after work, that after your shift, to like get the negativity energy out and like really do some self-love and self-care because it's so needed with nurses?
Yeah. So pre-shift, I personally, so my workplace right now is about 25 to 30-minute drive, which isn't bad, but I will leave an hour early. It gives me plenty of time to find parking, gives me plenty of time to walk on shift, lots of time to get report. It's much more relaxed versus, and like I show up early. That's just me. That's my thing. You know, theoretically, we were taught that to be on time in nursing is to be 10 minutes early so that you can get report and you know, relieve your coworker and nice enough, right? They've already done 12 hours, they're done. There are those who believe you're not paid for coming in early, which is true. So they show up right at 7. If I was to show up right at 7, I would feel so rushed and so chaotic through the entire shift. I hate it. I will not do it if I can, and if I can try not to. So that's just me. I figured out that I do better coming in early. I get a better report. I'm relaxed. I can kind of eat a little bit. I can have a little bit of my coffee before really having to start running around. I also like to have my coffee first thing in the morning, like in blackness and silence. So I'll just sit on my new couch and I'll just sit there with my coffee and just there's no dinging, there's no yelling, there's no children running around, nobody needs anything of me at that point. This is just my moment to kind of collect my thoughts and just kind of relax. Going to work, I usually listen to like an ER pump up playlist that I've made for myself. So a lot of very high energy, fun kind of music that really kind of gets me in the mood. So you're coming to work, you're like, okay, you know, please let me see only those who, you know, need to be seen. You know, let me be put in the place where I need to be so that I can do the most good kind of thing. And then, you know, you kind of have to let it go. You have to be the more flexible you can be, the easier your shift is going to be. The more you can kind of relax and, oh, you have to go out on this transfer. Sure. it's not a big deal. Could I get worked up and really upset and all this kind of stuff? Absolutely, you could. Is it going to do me any good? Not at all. So I get report for the patient. We go out. I get to go into the city, and now I'm out of the ER for an hour before coming back to my own patients and having to kind of pick up again. Does it suck? Yes, but you know, transfers within the hospital system is just something that happens. It is what it is. And being able to kind of just flow and go and not let anything bug you that's not life or death. It's kind of the key. And I love that the sun is hitting my face right as I go. I'm like, what is this? Like I can't see. But again, it still wants
Telling
to
you.
go.
It's telling
But
you you need that light because you're
it's the
shining
light.
bright right now. You're
Which
shining.
has never happened before. Like I've done how many podcasts and the sun has never hit. So it's hitting my faucet. And it's like, that's so funny. I'm like, haha, we'll just kind of move you there.
Yeah, that means the universe is loving this conversation and what you're sharing because this is what you're meant to do and meant to share. So
Yeah.
it's just another reminder from the universe. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Well, you want to talk about the universe.
Yeah.
So I bought my husband a deck of stress relief like oracle cards or whatever when I went to Las Vegas last month. And I'd never touched the deck before. He'd opened it, but he hadn't really played with it. So I just went to like pull a card out of the middle of it. And sure enough, it was like intuition. You need to trust your gut. Da, da, da. And I'm like,
Oh my God.
okay, I see you. I see you. Okay, fine. I
Love it.
get it.
Oh,
All right. Fine. I get it. I get it. I get it. And again, when you start to lean into kind of the spirituality of it all and you kind of, you know, embrace the little quirky things that happen, sometimes you'll get kind of the pain in the butt patient and you're like, "Oh my gosh, what the heck?" But sometimes if you actually take the time to not necessarily get to know them, but like just give them a little extra time, sometimes you find out what's actually at the root cause of everything. And then you're like, had I not taken the extra 5 minutes, and again, questions are coming out of my mouth before I even realize what I'm saying, and you're like, oh, like that changes the entire course of what was happening. I thought you were just a drunk 16-year-old. Now, you're very obviously having PTSD flashbacks. Like, oh my God.
yeah.
So, oh yeah, just that. And that was one of those days where it was just like, I thought I was going to play Nurse Ratched. I was going to be the hard ass and I'm going to be like, oh, kind of giving this kid the gears. And by the time he actually kind of wakes up enough to be able to talk to anybody and stop puking everywhere, the older brother comes in and he's giving him the gears. I'm like, yes, the family's on board with giving the kid the gears. And the kid's like, oh, well, this is not a big deal. I've been drunker than this before. And I'm like, drunker than this before? I'm like, kid, you were comatose. Like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, well, yeah, like this isn't a big deal. I'm like, well, how long's that been going on for? He goes, oh, like 6 months. I'm like, and without even thinking about it, I'm like, well, what happened 6 months ago? I watched my dad die in our kitchen. Pardon me?
Oh my
So
God.
all of a sudden, I start talking to this kid, and it's like, so he's like, well, I can't sleep unless I get blackout drunk. I'm
Oh
like, you're joking. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, okay. And I'm getting the goosebumps again because like the story hits home. But it was one of those things where I'm like, have you told your siblings? Have you told your mom? Like, what's going on? He's like, no, no, I don't want to burden her. She's having a lot of trouble, all these kind of things. I'm like, well, bring the older brother in. We're gonna talk about it and we're gonna get you kind of on the right track. Because like I've watched enough intervention, I've seen enough alcoholics in my ER. I know exactly where this is potentially leading 15, 20, 30 years from now. Um, and this is the root cause. So let's get you some social work referrals. Let's get you some therapy referrals. Let's get you refer back to your family doc to maybe get some medications to help with this kind of thing. And like, let's get you help because no 16-year-old should ever witness that kind of thing, like ever. So, that was one of those times where it was like, I was definitely in the right place at the right time and I was asking the right questions. And, I started out being the hard ass and playing that role, but
yeah.
everything can change. and having that ability to change and then, flipping the care plan on its head to be like, holy, we're no longer just dealing with like a Friday night drunk. Now this is a whole other mental health issue and this poor kid needs help and going from there. So it's crazy.
That
And if you listen to things, if you trust yourself, this is what happens. This is what comes out of these scenarios. It's insane.
That's so awesome though. And I truly believe too that nurses have so much like spiritual powers in general. Like you guys are empaths. Like you guys are like higher vibrational. I don't know how spiritual you are in that
Super
sense.
spiritual.
Okay,
Oh
cool.
yeah, and you want to talk about like protection, and I've got like one on my
Yes.
ankle, and
Ah!
like got a stage spray because the ER is haunted, is all get out. So like
God.
we're
Yes.
spiritual.
Yeah, I feel like you have to be a like into spirituality or you're not even into it. It'll get you into it if you're not,
Oh yeah.
even if you go to nursing, because think about it, there's so many portals opening in a hospital because there's births happening and then there's people always dying. There's no way
Hmm.
that there's no like
Something.
energetically like things going on, and higher whatever energy going on at the hospital. So I know for sure nurses are so, so powerful in that sense where you guys have that extra intuition, have that extra power per se. And so you have to be spiritual in a sense, right? And so like were you ever spiritual growing up or was nursing kind of the point where it brought you into spirituality?
Yeah. So never really all that spiritual, not really all that religious growing up. Um, Mind you, when I was in grade 9, and this is just as the internet's being born kind of thing. I'm aging myself horribly, but internet's just being born at this point. There's no Google, there's no nothing. And every time I think about like, oh, it's just, maybe I'm just, the phone is listening, the algorithms, once they figure out what you like, they send you more, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm like, well, before the internet, I've always found myself in all the metaphysical shops in where I lived. My first deck of actually, ha 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 ha. Oh my God, she's hanging out. My first deck of tarot cards, like she's beat up to nobody's business, but like I didn't know what tarot was. I was just like, oh, let's just kind of grab these cards. And they followed me and I've had them for forever and I'm crap at tarot, but it's just one of those things where it's just a sign to me to say like you were into this before, the world figured out what AI and algorithms were. This was you prior all that. So it's like, all right, I see you. Like, so I'll bring them to work every now and again, and we'll play with them on a full moon and just kind of mess around a bit. But I mean, you can't be around that much life and death without kind of getting a sense that maybe there's a little bit more to things. Maybe there's more to, people in general. Yeah, you can't be around that much death and not kind of get thinking that, is there more to life? Is there not? What now that I'm wrapping this body and moving it down to the morgue, like where's the soul at? Like what kind of like where are we going with this? And so the again, the more I kind of open up and talk about it and the more other people do. And so there was one instance in COVID where it was early enough that family members still weren't allowed at the bedside. There was a patient who wasn't mine that I don't even think they rang the bell, but I just was kind of like walking around and I just kind of popped my head in and I'm like, oh, we're like 20 minutes from death. Like, this is not like, oh, no, 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 this isn't good. So I gown up because they're in isolation. They may have COVID. They may not. We don't know. So I go to the bedside and I just kind of sit there with her. And sure enough, like 20 minutes goes by and she dies. And I've never actually been present for a death where we weren't intervening, where we weren't doing chest compressions or, I'm not in the room at the bedside because family's at the room, that kind of thing. So to watch actually somebody slip away is very disconcerting. It's almost a little bit more, um, it's just odd. It's one of those things where, they do have that final exhale and you're like, and they just, they kind of go limp and you're like, whoa, like that's really trippy. And so, I come out of the room, I degown and I deglove and all this, and I'm gonna go to the back to have a cry because that's what I do. And I'm like, oh my God, I forgot to walk out the soul. So something that I've been doing for a couple of years now is walking out the soul. So when somebody dies in the ER, once the family's been and gone and everything's, done and we're about ready to move the body down to the morgue, I'll go in and be like, hey, Mrs. So and so, I'm really, really sorry, but it was your time. I'm just gonna, if you want to follow me, I'm just gonna walk your soul out because again, the ER is right close to the front door. We don't have windows, but we've got that door. So I'll just kind of walk out and like 9 times out of 10, it just looks like I'm walking outside to get some sunshine. And so this instance, I was gonna go, to the back to cry. And I'm like, oh my God, I forgot to walk out the soul. So I go back. I'm like, okay, Mrs. So-and-so, I'm so, so sorry. It was your time. If you'll just follow me, I'll walk you outside. And the room was right close to the door. Like it's maybe 6 feet, if that. So I walk outside and the sky is just like super, super dark because, looks like it's gonna rain and storm clouds and everything. And I'm like, and I'm having a hard time because it was really upsetting. And I look over and here's the most beautiful rainbow I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm like, oh my God. I run back inside. I'm like, oh my God, guys, you got to see this rainbow. It's like the most beautiful rainbow. Everybody comes outside and it's gone. And so everybody kind of files back in and I stay outside. I'm like, okay, that one was for me. I get it. All right. So
So beautiful.
finding those little moments, once you lean into it, man, they're everywhere.
They really are. They really are everywhere. And those are what I call like signs or synchronicities from the
Yeah.
universe, giving that to you, that reassurance of you're in the right path, you're doing the right thing. And doesn't it feel so good?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, that was a little bit of sunshine in a very, very dark time, but I so needed it that day. Like so, so needed.
Oh, I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. That like literally made me tear up and get goosebumps.
I know.
That is so,
Yeah,
that's so
it was a
powerful.
lot. It was so much. And it
That's
wasn't even my patient, which is like the craziest thing.
all. And
Yeah.
it's meant to be. Like you just walked around and was like, hey, and she
Yeah,
needed.
what's up? Yeah. Well, because again, like we went from seeing 50 to 60 people in a day down to like 10, 15 at the beginning of COVID because nobody was coming into the ER. Everybody, didn't want to come in because they thought that there would be sick people there, which there were. Everybody avoided it. It was great and it was scary because like all of a sudden we're only seeing the people who actually need to be seen, like the true emergencies. That's the only thing coming in. But then at the other thing, it's like, this is so disconcerting because like everybody's so much sicker than we're normally used to seeing because people will come in usually within a couple of days to a week of being unwell. These people had put it off and put it off and put it off because they didn't want to come into hospital. So by the time they were like so sick that they had to come into hospital, like, man, we were intubating people and sending them out because like truly everybody was just so unwell, like so, so unwell, which was, usually you only see maybe one or two of those a shift. And it was every single one that came in was just so unwell. So it was weird. It was a super weird time, like so odd. And then, in other moments, we were doing yoga on stretchers. And, a buddy, my work wife, another day was clipping my hair in one of the ER rooms because there was nothing going on. And you couldn't get your hair cut. And I have a undercut on the back of my head. And so I'm like, oh my God, I just need this taken care of. So my buddy, I brought a pair of clippers and my buddy's, clipping my hair in the ER. And then we'd close the door because it was a 4-bed ward that was empty, which was never empty. And sure enough, like EMS opens the door and they've got a patient on the stretcher. They're like, oh, sorry. And I close the door back. I'm like, oh man, this looks so bad. But like, what else were you supposed to do in those days? Like, we showed up, we did what we needed to do, we came home, you know, you just got through it. It sucked, but you got through it.
That's so wild that we actually went through a time like that. Has it changed anything in the hospitals after COVID happened? Do you feel like it's more different or it just went
Mm.
back to like, original, like before COVID times.
Yeah, when people were super thankful and, oh my God, thank you so much. And like nonstop food coming in and gifts and the thank you and the praise and the pots and pans banging and all this kind of stuff was so weird because really working the ER is like being in an abusive relationship with the public. Like people cuss me out on the regular. And I get it. You're stressed, you're in pain, you're not sure what's going to go on, you're scared, you're not yourself. We're just it's like whatever. You just kind of brush it off kind of thing. It's not until things get physical that then that kind of creates a much bigger issue. But then what to have everybody like thank you so much and so thankful and the thank you cards and the food and all this and you're just like what is happening right now? Like this is weird. And then so now to kind of be almost 5 years in and to have people being back to baseline, being stressed, being freaking out, yelling, cursing. I think I've been called every awful name in the book in every language. Um, it's just like it's so weird, but that's what feels normal. So I'm like, oh, people are yelling at me. I feel better. Okay. Because I know how to deal with that. I don't know how to deal with people who are thankful. It freaks me out. So when everyone's like, oh my God, you guys are heroes, I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do with that. I don't want to be a hero. I just want to go to work and come home.
Aw. Yeah, it is like an abusive relationship. You're correct. Because
Oh,
you're
buddy.
so abused so much that you're like, what? Being nice to me is normal? But that shows how the world really is, which is really sad. I don't want to get into politics or whatever the world's going through, but it just shows
Yeah.
how a lot of the people in our life right now, like just society, are just taking things for granted. Like we are not
Yeah.
grateful. We're not kind. Feeling
No.
very stressed out, overwhelmed, anxious.
Yeah.
So lash out. We like yell at people. It's like we're mentally not well. So then
No.
our energy, like Earth right now, I feel like is positive in some ways, but negative too, because everybody's just like high
Oh,
sense of like negativity, which is so wild. But that's
yeah.
what I always like to teach people, like to be kind to other people. Like, why do you have to go to the hospital to yell at somebody when someone's trying to treat you or trying to help you out? Like that doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. Like you want
And
yourself.
and you better believe like we're doing the best we can with the situation that we've got. We're short-staffed a lot of the time. If you were truly an emergency, we would bring you back immediately. I like to tell people like be thankful that you actually are well enough to wait. If I'm bringing back immediately, that means things are not good. You don't want to be that person that I'm bringing back immediately. Like, I'm not even finishing the triage. I'm like, actually, we're just going to come around to recess because I know I need an IV, I need medications, I need blood work, I need x rays, I need all the things because you could just crash on me in an instant and I'm just trying to get ahead of it. You
Mm,
know, it's those things where and then people oh I was here first and you're like pardon me like I'm sorry I know that we've got like a deli ticket counter to get triaged. It is not first come first serve. It is sickest seen first. And again, be thankful that you are well enough to wait because many people are not.
that's true. Oh, that's a good reminder for me too, because I had to go to the ER like in September. I had a miscarriage and I went to the ER.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. It was tough, but I mean, I'm healed with that. But yeah, I was in the ER though. I was so annoyed. I was like, come on, why is this gonna take hours? Like my daughter's at home. I want to see her, blah, blah, blah. But like obviously it
Yeah,
was that like a huge thing. But I was complaining and I was annoyed because I was like, I'm thirsty. Where's my water?
but to be fair, like we see so many miscarriages and it is so sad because 90% of these people want these babies and are just heartbroken and crushed. And plus it's painful. And then you're worried and you're stressed and you're in pain. Like we understand. We get it. Um, but it just comes back to triage. Like if you weren't bleeding out and your pain's okay, like you're not lying on the floor in a fetal position, we can let you wait. And not to say that it's right, because we do try, especially for the miscarriages, we do try to be extra empathetic because, not all of us have been there, but like I can't imagine. So, and there's certain things that we need to do for that kind of scenario. So you're aware of it, but you're like, you're not dying, which again is as unfortunate that that's what it always comes to. But, you need help, and be aware of my children as they come in. As we talk about miscarriages, my adorable little children running in and being crazy.
Perfect timing.
But perfect timing. But yeah, it's not a perfect system. We are just doing the best we can. Please know that there are lots of resources for early pregnancy loss and infant loss. There are lots of networks, especially Canada Way. And it could have been 6 weeks, it could have been 20, it could have been 40. It does not matter how far along you were. A loss is still a loss. You imagine your life 18 years from now. Don't do that. That's got alcohol in it. Thank you. Busted. Um, and so, a loss is still a loss. So please take the time to grieve. You're allowed to grieve. Just because other people may not understand doesn't mean that you're not allowed to grieve.
Thank you. Yeah,
You're welcome.
definitely did grieve. I mean, this is not the first time. I've already had a miscarriage the first time, going through IVF, but I already was more prepared than that. But this
Yeah.
was kind of out of the norm because we just got an 8 week checkup and the baby's heartbeat was like really strong, right? And
Yeah.
then I guess 8 weeks and 5 days, the baby's heart stopped beating. So then we went to Hawaii, came back, and then it was 10 weeks, and then we're out, and then like this started happening, and I was like, oh, okay. So at that time, it was tough, trying to understand the process. But I think spirituality played a role in this because it made me believe in something more. And like, I feel like this is why I love spirituality and tapping into that part and why it's so important for anybody right now, just going through any hardship, because it gives you hope, in general. So,
Hope is, they've actually done a lot of studies on hope in medicine. And so they did a study where people were given the same diagnosis, one half with the doctor sounding hopeful and one with the doctor just kind of sounding neutral. And the ones who got kind of the hopeful inflection actually did a lot better, and had better outcomes than the ones that the doctor was just kind of neutral. So there's a lot of um, weight in hope, and this is why we're also very careful with false hope, because there's nothing worse than having some hope when we know that there really isn't any. So we're careful with that for sure. But no, hope is a powerful drug.
it is. It really is. And to me that, hope is the spirituality of like explaining things, or making things seem more understandable because of course our logical mind's never going to be able to process like whatever spirituality is, right? It's
Yeah,
just a lot. But it's however you want to process that. And for nurses especially, I feel like it's such a powerful tool of like spirituality, intuition plays into the spirituality as well, right? So I feel like it's all combined, and it's beautiful that you have this book and created Nursing Intuition, which I know that a lot of people will benefit from. Not only nurses, but just people looking to tap into their intuition,
everybody.
right? Like literally, it's such a powerful tool that we forget it's within us. Like we're
Yeah,
born with this, and people
yeah.
like forget that you have this powerful tool, right? It's just,
It's very easy to be dismissive. It's very easy. Sometimes it's a little hard to believe in the magic, but once you kind of just lean into the magic just a little bit, I don't know, life seems just a little bit brighter, and it makes it a little bit easier to cope with things. So, this is why religion is so important for so many, because it's their kind of axiom of hope. So I get it. I get it.
I get it too. But I mean, I get where they under religion, they understand the spirituality. That's where I
Yeah.
believe in it, but like not the institution, which I don't
Yes.
get, right? Like that.
Yes. I'm right there with you for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Just kidding. I'm not trying to be judgy. I'm just
Oh,
saying
no, no, no.
why we
No,
connect.
I just sometimes it's just kind of nice to do your own thing. Like you can believe in spirituality and music and religion without, the constructs of the institution. Absolutely. Like you do
Yes,
you, whatever.
exactly. Thank you so much for today and all bringing all your knowledge, amazing tips, stories. These stories are so amazing. I can listen to them like forever, honest. I really can. Like, thank you so much. So, where can people find you more or even get your book? And, if they want to reach out and, talk to you about
Yeah.
anything in general.
Yeah, so you can find me on Amazon if you search up Jennifer A. Johnson RN. You'll find my book currently on pre-order, hopefully December 1st. Will be out, out, out. But then also my planners and a couple of other cute little doodads there. LinkedIn, it's Jennifer Johnson BSCN RN. Instagram and TikTok, it's at ernurse.jen, Jenn. And then the website is just rxforgrowth.com. So where everything kind of comes together and then yeah, event sessions and hangouts and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. I'll put all of that obviously in the show notes below so people can find more. But thank you so much. It was such a pleasure, and I can't wait to see you talk more about this. And your second book is going to come out soon too. So not only this,
Hopefully I'm tentatively for March. I feel like it needs it needs a few more stories. So nursing power, how to break the stereotypes in nursing to build resilience. So I need some stories there, I think. It's a little thin. It's only like 24,000 words versus like 64,000 is this book. So it's like maybe it needs a little bit of a pump up, a
yeah,
little thickening,
yeah. That's going to be amazing. We're going to have you come back and talk about book two and more of
happily.
these amazing stories and, sharing more of your knowledge. So thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Of course.